Leading with that?
Probably smart to just lead with it. Yeah.
I don't know if y'all want to. We can.
Well, it gives us a baseline, right?
That's true. That's true.
And then you can even show the other part where he's talking about London and his hands are going everywhere if you really want to show what he's normally like when he's not under scrutiny about his personal life.
This whole COVID thing, man, my hair's out of control.
It's always there.
This is unbelievable. I look like I've got some kind of disease with all this weight I've gained. I can't quit looking at my nose. Look how big that thing is.
Yeah, you need to come to me for advice around that. I've got years of...
I can't believe I'm talking about my hair. I should be talking about my nose. That's the part that scares the kids. Got a huge nose. All right, y'all ready?
Yeah.
There we go. I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst. I train law enforcement in the military and interrogation in body language. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language, help people all over the world stand out, win trust, gain credibility whenever they speak, including some members of British aristocracy.
Excellent. Greg?
I'm Greg Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, resistance to interrogation instructor. I've got about 10 books on body language and behavior, and I talk to business, corporate America, and Wall Street.
Excellent. Chase?
I'm Chase Hughes. I retired from the military. I teach interrogation, behavioral profiling, and influence to government and civilian organizations, and I'm also a trial consultant.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to continue with our breakdown of Prince Andrew's body language in his interview. And but before we begin that, Greg has found a piece of video that we're going to talk about. We'll take a look at, and then we'll talk about it for a second.
Prince Andrew has spent his entire life in the spotlight, not least when he married Sarah Ferguson and when they separated 6 years later.
The Duchess of York talked about feeling alone and not being prepared for royal life when she first married you. Do you think lessons have been learned now that will make it easier in the future?
I would like to think that lessons have been learned, because, my goodness, some lessons did need learning. But memories sometimes can be quite short, so a challenge. I think, if anything, if those sorts of when it happens again, which it will do with William and Harry, then I suspect there will be a lot of people like their father and their uncle making sure that they're not necessarily they're fully aware, but people around them are fully aware of the consequences of getting it wrong.
Despite the divorce, the Duke of York has maintained an extremely close relationship with his ex-wife.
We're not getting engaged, okay?
So, what do you think, Greg?
Yeah, so a handful of things to look at in his baseline. This is a baseline with him being probed in his personal life again as well, so we get to see what's normal for him, nothing to lie about. But you can see that his focus is internal when he gets to the personal, and he breaks eye contact and goes to an internal conversation. He's talking, but he's not really making eye contact as he navigates. He's not releasing everything. The other really good thing to watch here, this is 2010. He uses his brow a hell of a lot to talk. I do the same thing. And residuals occur when you use those muscles over and over and over. Unless you Botox them, you leave wrinkles. And you can see it in his forehead now. You can see his forehead constantly moving. And that browbeating thing he does is left behind that. We can't know what's going on in his head, but we can use this as a baseline to look forward to the future and know that it's a personal issue. So we've got a good start point here.
Okay, excellent. What do you guys think? Mark?
Yeah, so I would agree, and I think it's probably a good baseline on how he performs when he is holding back some elements of information. Because if we look at his speech patterns, he's not being, verbally, fully expressive, I would say. He's clearly holding back information or couching information. And so I would take it as a good baseline for him and when he's couching information there. Also, the other baseline I take from this is he says a challenge, and that would feel to me like he's suggesting he's stopped talking, he's done. But if you shut up, he just keeps on going. So one of the things as an interviewer is to never take those, reiterations as a signal to go for a new question. If you shut up as the interviewer, he'll just keep on spilling the beans. Does that make sense in America?
Yeah.
Spilling the beans?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What do you think, Chase?
That's absolutely true. And there's another technique while you're interviewing. If someone does the challenge thing, you just repeat a couple of the last words that they said. The verbal reflection or verbal mirroring, as they teach at the FBI, that really gets it out of them. And you can see this happens a couple of times in the interview. And we see another baseline for this lip-licking hygienic gesture. And you even see it at the very beginning of this clip, right before he kisses his wife at their wedding even. And we saw a couple of more things, the face wrinkles that Greg talks about. We call that, in my training, I call that expression etching. So it just etches over time. But we also see he makes eye contact the same way a lot of charismatic people do, which is 50% of the time while we're speaking and 70% of the time while we're listening. So he does that a lot. If you go watch Bill Clinton on Conan O'Brien get interviewed about his first job he ever had, you'll see him look down at the ground and smile while he's recollecting the memory. But we have a good baseline here. So we see some of the behaviors that might look stressful in a different scenario. Now we understand are different.
Excellent. And what I'm seeing is, I'm always talking about loping, and it's how when you tell a story, you start talking, you're just loping along. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing a baseline of him just loping along, and we don't see that at all in this interview. It's nowhere to be found in there. I've been looking for it. It's one of my favorite things to judge things from. Once you get a baseline on their loping, what they sound like and look like. Nothing in there after he starts this interview. So for me, and his attitude, of course, is a lot different as well. You know, he's not all stressed, but we see him relaxed. Not that he shouldn't be relaxed in this, not that he should be relaxed in this other interview, because he's being, everything's on the line there. But
she's more of an interrogator than this lady was.
What a great job she does. Yes. I keep saying it, but my goodness. In these examples we're going to see an example of when we get the pizza part, where she asks him a question, he talks about it, and then she turns around and asks it again. She does it almost not every question, but she's so good at that. So good at it. So let's get started with question 1.
Virginia Roberts has made allegations against you. She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London. She went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell, your friend. Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
So, Chase, you're going to say something before we watch that. What are we going to say about that video we watched beforehand?
Right at the beginning of the interview, if you've heard of micro expressions before, it's basically just a tiny, quick facial expression. And there is a beautiful example there. It's a wonderful teachable moment for anybody that's watching. Right as she says, when you guys got married, or words to that effect, you can see the sneer on the left side of her face where she shows contempt for the prince in that moment. You can see the side of her face tighten up. So when you see like a one-sided smile, that's what a contempt facial expression look like. And it's the only facial expression that is asymmetrical.
Excellent. Okay. So let's talk about what we're seeing in this first, when she questions him here about Virginia Roberts. Mark, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I actually want to go to his strategy here, because he foreshadowed this strategy, as we talked about in our first episode together, when he said, that's the bit that I remember, suggesting that there will, in the future, be elements that he does not remember. And so I would suggest here, he's now on his rehearsed piece. He's already strategized. I'm going to say, I don't remember this. I don't recall that. And so I think that's what we're seeing playing out here, is a strategy. What I'm interested in is what can we detect underneath that, because this is rehearsed for him. This is his moment. So I'm wondering from everybody else, how's he doing?
Greg, you want that one?
Yeah, not so well. So number one, he's got that problem of steepling, and his hands are in his lap, so he can't go any further down to show that he has been compromised. So he starts to middle his hands and do some wonky thing with his hands. That's energy trying to escape the body. I want to get my rear end out of this chair and out that door, but I can't, so I'm going to try to find a place to go. right in through here, and it's harder to see in this, but pay very close attention to his pupils. They don't just dilate, they pinpoint again. That is stress. When your eyes start moving, when your actual pupils start to move, that's a really good indicator of stress levels. The last one that I really am paying attention to, not only does he drop his jaw to cover his throat, but his jaw recesses and his upper lip drops. I almost think he looks like he wants to cry for a split second there, that little micro expression.
Looks like a little boy.
He does. He looks like he's on the carpet. Mom has gotten him for doing something, and it's...
Yeah.
He's not doing
so Chase, what do you got, Chase?
Yeah, so that pupil dilation, this is a rare thing to see in these video interviews because this camera is super high def. The angle's really great. And pupil dilation is something you look for only when there's a steady lighting conditions. If the lighting conditions are changing, that's obviously probably due to the lights. So this is a perfect setup. So if you go back and watch this clip, you can see the pupils start changing in size. Another thing you can see from over his shoulder is his breathing rate starting to increase. You can see that shoulder going up and down. And another one, just for this small clip, you can also get his pulse by looking at his legs towards the end. And I think back to what Mark said about this whole thing being rehearsed, that's the reason we're seeing him nod and say, yep, yep, yep. He's saying, I've done that. Yep, I've prepared for this. I've prepared for this. He's nodding in anticipation of the next step of his plan.
Right. Yeah. And so I want to jump in here and just add and reiterate on this. This isn't stress because he wasn't expecting this question.
Right.
This isn't stress because he's going, what am I going to say here? He's got it planned. This is stress about something else. That's what's important.
Scott, here's a place to talk about the thing. This guy, if you think he's stupid, you're stupid because this guy is brilliant. This is methodical, and he has a process-driven approach. And Scott, I know you can talk more to this. I call it chaff and redirect.
Yeah.
As I'm going to lead so much stuff behind me that you'll chomp at one of those, and the minute you do, I'll take you there. And he is master. In this conversation.
Yeah, he's great. He's a great storyteller. That's what makes it so good. He's seen a lot of stuff. He's got a lot of history behind him. He's heard people tell stories. He's got to learn the stories of the history of the royal family. He's got to know all that stuff. So he's been hanging around people who tell stories great. And he's become a great storyteller. Now, there's a guy named Yuri Hassan, and he's at, I think it's Purdue. And he's the guy that did the studies on the brain and storytelling. And what he found was your brain will sync or connect with someone else's brain and hang on as you tell them a story. It happens very quickly. I won't get into the details of the studies he did, but they're fascinating. Yuri Hassan, I believe it's Purdue. So if you want to learn about that, if there's somebody watching wants to learn about that, it's a great thing to check out. So that's what he's doing here. That's why these things, as we know, why stories are good in marketing, they're good in all kinds of things. That's why he puts these almost in story form. As you go along, you'll see him so you can hop from one thing to the other. And like Trump, when Trump, as Greg's pointed out before, when Trump says something and he wants to, that's it. I've said it. There it is. He goes, gets that tag. He's tagging, but it's not tagging, but he's marking those spots where he's completed something, like Mark was saying, by saying or okay or whatever the words were he was saying. That's exactly what he's doing there. And to Chase's point, when we're talking about micro expressions, we're talking about the dilation. When he gets to the part, she says. Talks about Virginia and having when she says against you, when she says you, that's when those they get small and they start getting bigger. His pupils, you can see them get small and then start getting bigger. That's when the big one hits.
Against you. She says she met you against you. She says she met you against you. She says she met you. And
then at the same time, if you'll notice, and I'll show this when we go back, he's got a lot of nostril flare. It's really small, really small. If we're going to talk about micro expressions, let's get up in its hind and talk about the micro parts. Very small, but I'll show where that happens as well. It's the same thing.
Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts, has made Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts, has made Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts, has made.
On the larger side, when he starts, he does what I refer to as fading facts. As he's talking, if you ask somebody a question, did you light the car on fire that caught the house on fire that killed the kid in the house? And they say, well, I wasn't there. I don't know what you're talking about. Usually that time of day we go to the park. As the more they talk, the quieter it gets. He's showing he's unsure about this answer, and I believe he knows something's up. There's some more information about this girl and him that's going to pop up later. Somewhere, I don't know what, but he knows but he's still taking that chance. He can't say, here's what I know, here's what I did. So we're seeing those fading facts as he's lying, but he's pretending he's telling the truth. But you see it get quieter as he goes along, as he tries to distance himself from that lie. So, all right, anybody else?
Hey, one thing I will add, the last thing, the pupil dilation and pinpoint, when I worked SEER, that was the only place it was common. You don't see that very much in people because if they're shocked, often their pupils may dilate, and then go back to pinpoint. But really, the pinpoint and opening, that's a rare thing to see. Not just Chase in an interview with a camera, but in people in general. You just don't see it often.
It's true.
Chase pointed that out yesterday when we were talking about that. When he gets to the part where he says Virginia, he's like blank. But then when he gets to you, they then start getting zeroing in. It's. I'll show it up close because it's fascinating what's going on in here. That head is.
Chase, you had the tag on the name, and I think we should talk about that. But that, to me, it's weird to watch them move because you just don't see it that often.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
I'm just trying to work this out because you said you went to break up the relationship, and yet you stayed at that New York mansion several days. I'm wondering how long.
But I was doing a number of other things while I was there.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay. I've gone through this in my mind so many times. At the end of the day, with the benefit of all the hindsight that one could have, it was definitely the wrong thing to do. But at the time, I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do. And I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is.
All right, Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, guys, and hopefully I don't steal anybody's thunder, but this is my single favorite moment of the entire video because he is frail here. This is the most frail you'll see him throughout the entire interview. This is a mea culpa if there is one anywhere. Hey, I did something stupid, and if you just said that, it probably would have come across just fine. But instead, definitely the wrong thing. His body language is showing that. We talk about eye movement a lot, but one of the things to note is that when people get emotional, their big, heavy lunk of a head drifts down into the right. And you'll see he is kind of balled up, but he is gesturing and illustrating what he's thinking. His head is down to the right. His eyes are down to an internal conversation. And then his brow is down as concentration. He is looking over for some approval. And his eyelids at this point are not fluttering. I'll use your term, Chase, and follow it. His shutter speed, his processor is running. It's not eyelid flutter, it's processor. And then he looks up at her and requests approval as he tries to salvage some dignity. This is a two-step process. He's saying, hey, here's this horrible thing I did. It was dumb. He's working through the mechanics of it and trying to find at least a scrap of dignity in the background and saying, I guess I was too honorable. I think it's trying to recover some of what he should be. It's the most frail moment in the entire video to me.
What do you think, Chase?
I completely agree with Greg. And this is a great humble brag, but I think it's also going into the narrative. It's going into his narrative, and we see a shoulder shrug the moment that he says it. And we see when he's trying to gain a little bit of approval, we see the eyebrow flash and a head tilt. We expose our necks to people when we want to be trusting, when we're curious about something, and protecting us from big cats was our original reason we had to raise our shoulders. And that was from old Joe Navarro. And that whole time throughout the interview, every time he gets a question, he knows he's prepared for, or he knows that it's going to be tough. You see the large upper chest inhale before he answers every time.
Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I want to hit on one thing here, which is one of the ways he tries to get compliance here and move this away. So we know that this is a hot spot for him because he wants to move on. And he says, I've been through this in my own head so many times. So what he's suggesting is I've already thought about this. Can we just move on? Because I've already thought about this. I've done the processing. We don't need to talk about this in the open. I've thought about it. And then from there, because that doesn't succeed, because the interviewer doesn't go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, you've already thought about this. What haven't you thought about? What would you like to talk about? That doesn't happen. She's silent. It has to move on. And so that's why he has to go there into, I think that's a great idea there, Chase, the humble brag or the virtue signaling.
Yes.
And it's a big signal to say, I'm just, too honorable. Too honorable. That's extraordinary.
That's his ego, because as he's going through there, and I think he's thought about that before, we can stick that in, and that's that ego coming out. Because what he's trying to do when he comes out of there, as he's talking, he's open, he's saying, but you'll notice when he first does his illustrators, when he's open, you'll see that foot come up as the barrier. It goes down fairly quickly, but still it's up guarding as he's supposedly being open. So, and I think that's what that is. This is ego getting out of hand. It sort of gives you an idea about what kind of person you're dealing with there. On the narcissist level.
Again, we're dealing here, Scott, with somebody who doesn't have any advisors around them right now, because a decent advisor would have heard that from him and gone, Your Royal Highness, you're not going to say that. Here's exactly what you're going to say. You are going to take responsibility for an element of this and therefore deflect from the element which you're not going to take responsibility for. But you are going to take responsibility. And Chase has talked about this a number of times, which is building somebody a bridge to get out of this situation. Yeah. Now, this interviewer, I don't think, is building many bridges, and that's what's great about it. But it's not that you can't build your own bridge out of this. But he's not taking the advice on that. And so that's why we're going to see this become a disaster for him. Ultimately, in that, not to spoil the plot of this, but he ends up essentially resigning the next day due to all of this.
And one thing you notice when he says, I've thought a lot about this, if you go back and listen, he says he only thought about it after it became public.
Right. He says as soon as, after everybody knew about it. Exactly what he says, right? I don't know if we covered that one, but that's one of the best lines in the entire thing.
I thought so too. I wanted to make sure we at least put a little thumbtack in that one.
I'm just trying to work this out, because you said you went to break up the relationship, and yet you stayed at that New York mansion several days. I'm wondering how long...
But I was doing a number of other things while I was there.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay. I've gone through this in my mind so many times. At the end of the day, with the benefit of all the hindsight that one could have, it was definitely the wrong thing to do. But at the time, I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do. And I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is.
All right, everybody good?
Yep.
Okay, so let's move along.
Another guest was John Brockman, the literary agent. Now, he described seeing you there getting a foot massage from a young Russian woman. Did that happen?
No.
You're absolutely sure, or you can't remember?
Absolutely sure.
So John Brockman's statement is false?
Well, I don't know Mr. Brockman, so I don't know what he's talking about.
But that definitely wasn't you getting a foot massage from a Russian girl in Jeffrey Epstein's house?
No.
All right. Yeah. So now it doesn't sound like, you think foot massage, what a big deal. But when you see, I watched the first episode of this Epstein thing. Greg and I both watched it. When you see that first episode, you'll realize why that's an important part here. Why that's a key to what's happening in that house. And some other things that I see going on along, of course, you've got that head tuck. But when you pay attention to his blink rate, and I don't want to step on you, Chase, because I know a lot of times everybody covers the same things. We try to stay out of each other's way. So if I'm not stepping on your blink rate thing,
not at all.
It plummets. I think he blinks 3 times during this whole thing, because he's making sure she's believing him. So if he has to add any qualifiers, and then you start looking at he never says no when she asks him. She says, "So Brockman." In other words, so Brockman's lying. He never says no. He starts talking, but he never says no, which is of course one of the biggies from that. And his movement overall in this thing, he's almost like a statue compared to the way he is in the rest of the interview. Doesn't move hardly at all. He does some, but not much at all. So I think that's important as well, because he's taken in all that information. The only thing I didn't see in there was his eyes get really big, which I kept expecting that. As you'll see when somebody, you get him, he's got the head turn as it's going, but he doesn't, the eyes don't get really big, you know. But all this after that big fake surprise he throws on.
Right. Well, I think that's his big eye movement, right?
Must be.
Yeah. That's
so. Keep going, Greg. What do you got?
Yeah. For me, this is the classic overreaction, right? If you don't know someone at all, and I mention them, you don't go, "Oh, he was there. I don't know this guy, but I'm reacting that way." Well, something caused you to cue. That's one of the biggest overreactions in the entire video, is that crazy shock with the eye thing, puts his head forward, leans it down. His pupils actually close in this one, Chase. I'm sure you've noticed better than I did, but his pupils actually close very, very tightly in here. His eyes are all in. He's got a conspicuous retreat. And then he makes eye contact solidly when he goes to the no. And it's one of the emphatic no's in this entire thing. I think there are about 3 that are emphatic denials, and this is one. Because this, I think you're hitting it dead on, Scott, because this is the gateway. When you watch what Epstein did, his creepy factor starts this way. So that's, I think, what you're saying.
Chase, what do you got?
I think the surprise was genuine, and I think it might be in reaction to, oh crap, that guy said something, or maybe
I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, you can see, if we go back, you can see the sclera, the white part of our eyeballs above and below the iris, the little colored circle, which is kind of hard to fake, especially if you're under a lot of stress. And we see, if anybody watching this, if I accused you of doing something that you didn't do, you'd say that statement's absolutely false. None of us would have a problem calling someone else a liar if it was false. And then again, if I have guilty knowledge about something, then a foot massage sounds really dirty. But if it's just a foot massage and I don't feel guilty about anything else, what's the harm in saying, yeah, that was me? I was getting a foot massage.
Yeah. And you'll see it, like, again, you'll see the importance of that in that Netflix thing, in the Epstein. So what do you got, Mark?
Yeah, so I think he's performing over the surprise in order to trying to create another narrative there, which is curiosity. I think, exactly as we've said so far, he's genuinely surprised by that, either because it's, hey, I didn't think that guy would say anything, or what you've got a witness. And the thing I want to get across to you, listening to this, is if you're going to lie, you've got to make sure there isn't any evidence out there, because the evidence is going to show up at some point. Lying is for the lazy. Lying is for the people who don't want to take the punishment right now for what they've done, okay? Because the evidence is showing up later, maybe in your life, maybe in somebody else's lifetime, but it's showing up, it's coming out. Unfortunately, here, there is an eyewitness who is alive now and has talked. So now what's his way out of this? It's incredible. It's well, I don't know him. The idea that if I don't know somebody, it means they could be a liar. That's his logic. And if we unpack that logic, we see that it's risible, it's laughable. That's not accurate, that if you don't know somebody, it means they're probably a liar. So I think we know he's fried now. This is now going one way, and it's all downhill from here for him. He's not in control of this anymore.
I agree. And I think what that big fake was, he's trying to catch his surprise at that point, because which shows you he's probably, I don't know if this guy angers easily or not. I would bet from seeing that he probably does, because I think it got away from him and he was trying to catch it going, what? Instead of being showing his anger, he showed that.
He does it twice. He does it twice in this interview. That same exact eye movement thing. Later, when they're talking about Florida, I believe is when he does it again.
Is that the one where he's talking? I'll find it, but it's one where he's talking about. He goes, "Well, there was a dinner, and I was there." That part. There was a party.
Was snarky and sarcastic. Well,
oh man, it was so
I love
awesome.
that one. That's condescending.
You know what that reminds me of is Judge Smales from Caddyshack.
Hand to God. I was thinking as I was going, I thought I'll drop that in there for when we did it, because I thought that'd be too cornball.
I'll play. You don't want that scholarship, do you? I guess I don't. I guess you don't.
Yeah.
And one quick teachable moment we can share with our viewers here is, at this point, if you're ever asking somebody questions and they don't know how much data you have, this is when we would do something called a punishment question or a bait question. Yep. A bait question specifically starts with the words, just real quick and easy. Is there any reason? And that's all you have to say. So we're not going to say, I have a bunch of evidence. We're not going to say anything, but is there any reason that somebody would have come forward just yesterday and said that they saw you do X, Y, and Z? And one quick tip with the bait questions is we raise the stakes in the beginning. So we say, listen, John, I really like you, and I just want you to think very hard before you answer this question. And then towards the end, we want to be a little bit vague, because if I say, is there any reason someone saw you do this at 9:02 p.m. and you did it at 9, then you could say, no, there's no way.
Well, here's another great opportunity to teach something you just said, right? There's a thing called we know all. And I may have a file full of garbage and I can say, I know that you did something. The minute I nail down a fact that isn't true, we go from we know all to we don't know anything, right? And that's the point. The more finite you are with your bluff, the more danger you're in.
Yeah. And another one I think is hilarious is when you add too much information, too many small things. It's like, geez, I don't know. For example, if you were to say, would there be any reason whatsoever?
Yeah.
That little pause for your DNA to be in you know what I'm talking about? Hair, eyelashes, skin cells, maybe you spit, maybe you call all these things you never find, but you throw all these things out there. They're thinking, and you can see them running that scenario in their head as well as you keep going down that road. And you're just throwing out the bait question. Oh, it's one of my favorites. That's why I like to read techniques so much. I know I talk about that a lot, but it's like it's like a muscle car. You know, you can put all what tires you want, flames on the side. Oh, paint it whatever color you want.
Not recognizable from two people at one point because you get so good at your own version. I think
that's
what
the key.
The four of us work well together is our body language versions are so different because we come at it from different angles. It's what makes this whole interrogation and lie detecting and body language thing a great second career.
Yeah. All right, everybody good?
Yeah.
Did you worry that he had something that could compromise you?
No.
Do you regret that trip?
Yes, happened.
She provided a photo of the two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
You've seen the photo.
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
You want to go first, Mark?
Yeah, so we could also baseline that with some of the yeses that he gave earlier around places that he'd been as well, and we talked about those in the first episode. And let's just look at it simply. Let's just say you've got upward intonation and downward intonation. I mean, it's a little more complex than that, but let's make it really simple. You know, there's the rising tone, which often can signal an idea of there's something coming next, or that's a question, not a statement. There's another bunch of things as well, but let's keep it relatively simple. So his no's or yeses will tend to illustrate that there is probably something else there, and it is not emphatic. An emphatic no will be no. An emphatic yes will be yes. In fact, loud and downward intonation we tend to call command tonality, which I'm doing for you right now. And questioning tonality will be up like this and suggests there's something coming next, which is why it kind of keeps you on this kind of hiatus. and gets quite annoying after a while if I carry on making statements, but having that upward
forehead
inflection.
while he's doing that. I love it.
Yeah. So let me leave it at that, because I just think it's a good teachable element to just see tonality in simple forms of there's up or there's down, and down could be seen as more decisive, and up could be seen as there's something more to come, or I don't quite know.
Excellent. Chase, what do you got?
If you're about to get hit and you know someone's about to hit you, you're going to turn your head and look at them. And with everything here, if we know somebody who turns out to be a disgusting human being, like Epstein, we'll be comfortable saying it. We'll be comfortable saying the act. We'll be comfortable saying the person's name. We'll be comfortable saying it's disgusting. I hate it. I denounce all of those things, which never happens once in this video. And it culminates with what I think here is one of the key factors that runs this whole thing. When she says, are you worried he had something that he could use to ruin your reputation? His whole body's frozen. There's a tiny no. And maybe the verbal stuff isn't there, but the rest of the evidence throughout the entire conversation really does spell out that if I'm worried that there's a video that might get leaked somewhere, I'm not going to talk about that person in a negative light ever. And I can never denounce what they do, what they did, and I'm going to use their name as little as possible in the interview. Bring as little attention to the person who has a gun pointed at my head as possible.
Excellent. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so this one's really easy for me. Everything else aside, all that's great and all that is true. And that's the compounding. But no one who is not concerned does this. Were you concerned? No. I mean, look at his brow. Look how knit and tight and squared down it is. Imagine somebody looking at you and singing happy birthday like this. What would you think? He's communicating stress and concern with his brow, and it is knitted and knotted. And that's good enough for me that if I didn't have any sound, I would know something is wrong right there.
Excellent.
Did you worry that he had something that could compromise you?
No. No.
Do you regret that trip?
Yes. Happened.
She provided a photo of the two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
You've seen the photo.
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
Excellent. I've got nothing to add to that, except for it's just really quiet because, you know, it suggests we're seeing deception, I think. There. All right, here we go.
Do you remember dancing at Tramp?
No. That couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was at home with the children.
Mark, you go ahead.
Well, let's go back to that tonality. Let's just say that if I'm giving an emphatic no, do you remember dancing at Tramp? No. Yeah, it's like, no. So that elongation of it. Now, I think the elongation is because he's ramping up to his strategy. And he's already got this sorted out. It's not possible to dance at Tramp because you're having pizza at Pizza Express with your kids. So it's just, he's moving into strategy here. That's why there's that funny tonality.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
This is where the interviewer asks him, do you remember instead of did it happen? And that is, you're giving them a permission slip to just say yes or no. And what we'd like to say, we know that this whole thing is going to play off memory. So we're going to say, why would she say this? Or what happened that evening? Tell me about this entire day. Where were you? And did you do it? And this is also an argument or a denial from recollection. It's not a denial. It's a denial of recollection. So keep in mind, he's not denying that it happened. He's just saying the date might be wrong at this point.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, for me, he's on his plan we talked about yesterday, or in the earlier version. He's on his plan. He knows what he's going to say here, so he's just prepped. Nope. It's just a kind of a flippant no. I don't see anything dramatic. All I see is him ready for battle. He knows that he's already prepared. Hey, I was with my kids.
Yeah. Here again, I'm just seeing fading facts. I mean, that's the big one that sticks out for me. As he's talking, it just gets quieter as he goes along, which is another sign of deception.
Do you remember dancing at Tramp?
No. That couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was at home with the children.
So, all right, everybody good?
Good.
Right.
You know that you were at home with the children. Was it a memorable night?
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule in the family that when one's away, the other one's there. I was on terminal leave at the time from the Royal Navy, so therefore I was at home.
All right. Chase, you want to go first?
Sure. This is what I call an over answer. So someone makes a denial and says, no, I didn't drive to that convenience store and rob it. I drive a Ford Explorer. It's about a year old. It's black and just got it vacuumed out a few weeks ago. And I also park it in reverse in my driveway. So no, couldn't have happened. So we're just adding unnecessary detail to something to help the answer sound more credible and more full of information for the person listening.
Right. I totally agree with you, because what he's doing is building that picture, like you got to take out of your head and give to somebody else. And so they're on the impression you actually see all this stuff happening as they add these qualifiers to what's going on. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, exactly, guys. That is an inject. That is information he's packaged. He's prepared. If you notice, his baseline is pretty human. It's normal. He's rhythmic. He's telling a story. And all of those details are there to support. And there's a word that people don't commonly use to close out a story, therefore. That's his proposal as to why he couldn't have done it.
Yeah, because he wants your brain to go on and fill all that in.
That's right. That's a summation. That's Alan Dershowitz talking, not him, right? That's the way people talk when they're presenting their case.
Yeah. All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so virtue signaling there, I'm a hands-on dad. This is the arrangement that we have with the Duchess. So that would be his ex-wife, the kid's mother. But, most people would probably go, so I got this arrangement with the kid's mother, if they're divorced or they're on actually quite good terms. So he's more likely to say, Sarah and I have an arrangement. He calls her the Duchess, and then goes on to say terminal leave from the Royal Navy. Okay, so we know you're a vice admiral. We understand that. You maybe don't need to tell us the name of the institution that you are in service and the vice admiral of. So for me, it's, as we've talked about before, and I think, maybe Chase coined this term is reading out the resume. It's signaling that resume, and that's quite a hot signal of potentially overcompensation for something.
Now, let me ask you guys something. We've all been young men before. When you went out, what time did you start going to the clubs? What time did you start going out when you were looking for chicks, man? When were you going out? About what time was that?
9:15.
Yeah,
Wait.
at least.
Yeah.
At least. I mean, in London, it's you've got to go out after the pubs shut anyway, because you don't want to get caught up in the 10:30, 11 melee. Tramp goes till well late. I mean, it's renowned for going later than anything else.
So at their house,
get in.
At the prince's house, he's not by himself. He's going to have somebody there to watch the kids. He's going to go, sure. I'm going to step out for a little bit. I'll be right back. I'm going to go out and see what's going on at so-and-so's house, whatever his excuse is going to be. She's out of town, and this guy's out, he's going to he's clubbing at that point, So he says at 4 or 5 o'clock or whatever. No, nobody's going to go out at 4 or 5 o'clock. Those people aren't even up yet, at that point.
I have omission.
Place.
I have omission. Right? There's a big and then, right? What did you do? Well, I went back from, I guarantee if you nailed him down, well, we left the Pizza Express and then went home and went to bed.
Yeah.
4 or 5 is not the time when you go to Tramp. Tramp is next to Fortnum and Mason. They do high tea. So if you're looking for high tea, Fortnum and Mason will do it for you. There's no dancing there. You have to go next door to Tramp at, midnight onwards for
good catch,
dancing.
Great catch.
Yeah. And also you see him, you're seeing the self-soothing things. You see him try to calm himself down with his hands. It's not huge, but if you watch it, it goes from very light to getting just a little bit more as he starts rubbing his thumb there. What do you got on that, Chase? Anything?
Yeah, so that's this with the self-soothing behavior. Aside from what I already said, our good friend Joe Navarro has one of my favorite phrases, and it's small enough to fit on a bumper sticker, but it was profound when I heard it. And he said, "Any repetitive behavior is self-soothing," and that's all you need to know.
I always call that you're making familiar the unfamiliar. When you're in a bad place and you want to make yourself comfortable, everybody does something: tug your ear, play with your hair, pick your nails. Whatever it is, it makes you comfortable. Pacing. And that's all there is to it.
All right.
Thanks.
Here we go.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do. A very unusual thing for me to do. I've only been to Woking a couple of times, and I remember it weirdly distinctly. But as soon as somebody reminded me of it, I went, oh yes, I remember that. But I have no recollection of ever meeting or being in the company or the presence.
Okay, Mark, that's yours. What do you think?
Yeah. So going to Pizza Express is a weird thing to do. That's condescending because Pizza Express in the UK is a quite a nice place for fairly ordinary people to go to. So what he's doing there is trying to get a laugh of recognition out of the interviewer to say, somebody like me would never go to Pizza Express, so it's very, very rare. But the smile we see from him doesn't have the narrowing of the eyes and doesn't have, therefore, these darker areas appear there. So he's trying to get compliance. He doesn't truly mean the smile, which is why he doesn't get a laugh back or a nod of recognition. Because it is true. It is a weird place for His Royal Highness to show up at Pizza Express. If I was at Pizza Express and, suddenly, Prince Charles sat down next to me, I would be like, well, this is very, very notable and odd. So yes, it is odd. He's trying to get compliance from the interviewer and a laugh out of her. But what gives it away is it's not a true Duchenne smile. It's not true pleasure. It's one of those slightly forced, come on, laugh along with me, join in smiles.
All right. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I'd take it a step further. I'd say it's a contained, controlled, kind of a snarky smile and almost a criticism of the whole thing, right? Look, I'm low-classing myself. I'm debasing myself by going there, and we all know it, exactly like you said, Mark. But then there's that contained and curving down, controlling the smile, almost like he's self-amused. So, yeah, I think that's why she doesn't respond, is because he looks self-amused.
Chase?
Yeah, I think that smile was, I'm pretty damn pleased with myself right now.
Yeah.
And you should be too, and you could join me. But here's the one thing that I got out of this that I think it's easy to miss. And I think this is the one thing that pulls everything together. If the reason he doesn't remember is because it didn't happen, then he'd be comfortable saying it didn't happen. And here's why. If he remembers every detail of going to the pizza place because it was an unusual event. So let's go back. I remember the pizza place because it was unusual. If he remembers unusual events with great clarity, meeting this woman and dancing with her and then later having sex with her would be an unusual event. So either A, he makes a firm denial, that's unusual, I would remember it, it never happened, ever. Or B, that's just a usual event. Doing things like that becomes something that's usual.
So here's a place where I may have a different opinion on this one. This is a good opportunity for us. I think he has a prepared denial. And the reason he comes back at the end with the statement, I remembered that, but I don't remember her. I think it's part of his strategy and his prepared statement, Chase. And I would say either is possible, because we can't, the cool thing about what we do is we can't see inside their heads, right? But what we can do is see the symptoms. It's one or the other. I feel like he's got a strategy and he's trying to grasp at it and hold on and go back and repeat this. I think
I completely agree.
Every one of those things, and he's just denying them.
Right. So, I mean, either A, you make 100% denial, or B, you don't remember it because it's something you do all the time.
Right. And that's a possibility.
Maybe that's honest.
Right. So this points to me around being a good liar. You know, for anybody out there,
he's a pro.
Teach you how to be a good liar, but if you're going to be a good liar, not only do you need to sort out your details, but you must sort out your internal logic. Your internal logic must be foolproof around this, because anybody with a decent questioning power will just undo the logic, and then the story is gonna fall apart in front of you.
But let's assume for a minute, and this is a good discussion, so hopefully it's useful for what we're doing. Let's assume for a minute he is lying out loud and saying, I went to this pizza thing, and then doing by lie of omission the walk away. He is coached, very well coached, because he didn't verbal bridge one time. Not once did he verbal bridge. That's a great indicator. You know, that Navarro and Schaefer talk about verbal bridges. It's their term. But all it means is hiding time. And then after that, those kinds of things don't show up in this conversation. That chaff, that words that mean absolutely nothing with an occasional drift word that you want to pick up on is everywhere. And Chase, I get where you're going with that. I feel more like he's just accomplished as a liar because he's been doing it for a while. I'm not saying, and by the way, I'm not accusing, and I'm not saying he is lying. I'm saying there are signs of deception in that recovery for his story, right?
Well, and I want to add to that. I think what he's doing is distracting. And this may be very specific to a British public, because this is really for the British public, in that he's trying to save an element of the monarchy right now, which happens in British history, you know, every so often. And what he's doing is giving us an image of the royal family, a royal member in Pizza Express, so that, you know, our cultural brains go, whoa, isn't that odd? What an odd image. And we fixate on that rather than the logic of, yeah, but Tramp isn't open at 4 or 5. It's like you have people who look after your kids. You've got security on you and security on them. You can go out anytime you like, especially in the small hours of the morning or late at night. It doesn't make logical sense. This is a case of, have a look at that weird squirrel over there. Come on, look, British public, look over there.
At the same time, at the end of this thing, this is where it cues me in that he's been coached, because, and not just in this one, not for this one section, but overall, here's what you do when you're being, you know, in other words, hey man, check it out. Here's what you do when you're going to lie, when you're setting this whole thing up. Keep this in mind. And what he's been told is to remember every time that girl's name comes up, every time the situation comes up, be sure and say, I have no recollection of, because at the end, he gets that head sideways and he almost like a gotcha moment jets in there with, and I don't recollect whatever at the very end, like he's almost laughing about it.
Grab the
you know,
story.
it's always, yeah. So that's that part where he's got to, I've got to stick that in. Because he goes down, it's almost like he's jabbing in there with it to add that in at the end. So that's what tells me that he's had great coaching. This guy is so smart. I don't mean he's not a genius, I don't think, but God, he's really smart and knows how to do that. He's done it so well up to this point. But then again, I got to give that interviewer, what's her name, Mark?
Hang on. Mateless. Emily Mateless.
Man, she's really good at that. To not be, you know, in law
good to
enforcement.
have her role. I mean, what's interesting about her, Cambridge educated, I think Jesus College maybe, but the only presenter of that particular show, Newsnight, there's been female presenters before, the only presenter who wasn't privately educated. So, and that will tell you one thing, is she isn't going necessarily to fall for this status idea.
She's Canadian too, right?
She's Canadian, yeah. She was born just up the road a little bit from here. So Canadian British. So is outside of that coterie, those ranks of the aristocracy and royalty, and so he's not going to comply so much.
So I do want to go back for just a second to what Chase said, though, because I do think that's a great point when you're talking to people. If they don't remember something that is odd, maybe it's not odd for them. Just in this case, I think he's trying to stick to a story, but I think often when you're interrogating or you're talking to someone and they can't remember details because they've done it so many times, right? Subroutine.
There you go. All right, we good?
The world has now seen the photo that Virginia Roberts provided, taken by Epstein, we understand, in Ghislaine Maxwell's house.
Well, here's the problem. I've never seen Epstein with a camera in my life.
I think it was Virginia Roberts' camera. She said a little Kodak one that she lent to Epstein. He took a photo, and your arm is round her waist.
I don't remember that photograph ever being taken. I don't remember going upstairs in the house, because that photograph is taken upstairs. And I'm not entirely convinced that, I mean, that is what I would describe as me in that picture, but we can't be certain as to whether or not that's my hand on her whatever it is, left side.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorites. When we talk about people looking for a door, he's certainly looking for a door. He looks like he's tap dancing. If you see the sole of one foot turns up, the other is moving. This is not anything to do with an artery that we pointed out over and over and over. This is, I want to go somewhere. He's moving around. He's now nailed down. This is starting to get to the point where you're getting something viable. It's hard to say. He even says, yes, that's me, clearly in the photo. But his feet are looking for a place. Both feet are active. I don't remember that photo being taken. That doesn't say the photo was never taken. Nobody took that photo of me. I mean, if you ask me, was I in the photo? No, somebody must have photoshopped that. I don't remember going upstairs, ever going upstairs, he goes on to say, and that's upstairs. Well, how the hell do you know, excuse my English, how do you know that's upstairs? If you have never been upstairs, you're assuming, I guess. I'm not entirely convinced. That is, and falls very short of a no to me, very short of a that's not me. And he goes on, I don't think we have it in this piece of video, but he goes on to make a royal family reference immediately after this to put himself back at a higher status than everybody he's talking to when he says, as a member of the royal family, I don't often take photos, and all of those pieces coming together look like a guy who's looking for an out. It's chaff, it's a way to get away from everything, and it's not a clear denial.
And so, Mark, we're not dealing with the royal we here when he's saying we don't know or we're not sure?
No, I think that's he's taken some advice there from some photographic experts or advisors of some sort, and the advisors have said, look, we're looking at this, and nobody can prove it's a fake, so it could be a fake. That's a weird piece of logic if you untangle it. You know, you can critically think that out very, very easily. But that's the coaching around this. What's interesting is he goes outside of what I believe his coaching is on the camera piece, because he jumps on it. He jumps on it, and I think what's happening, he's going, I've come up with a better argument around this, which is there's a problem with that. I've never seen Jeffrey Epstein with a camera expecting us to go, oh, well, no. Oh, I mean, obviously, yeah, you've never seen with the camera, so that can't be a photograph of you.
He does that all through this show. Right. I mean, all through it, he comes up with stupid little, that can't be true.
Right. Well, she comes from, it's not his camera, it's somebody else's camera. I mean, so he's fried by that piece of I guess, skill of the interviewer in there. And then he goes back to his training. I don't remember. Suddenly it clicks in. Yes, that's right. They told me to keep saying, I don't remember. Just answer everything with I don't remember. What an idiot I am. I went for my own strategy there, and it just got blown out of the water immediately. That's what I think's going on. It's a horrible car crash. It's an awful, awful car crash.
Chase, what do you got?
My favorite thing about this whole thing is that he never says it's not me, doesn't make a denial, but even cooler than that, he does something called psychological distancing, where he says, that looks like, quote, somebody I would describe as me. Or that looks like what I would describe as me. Instead of that looks like me. That looks like what I would describe as me. That's a way I would describe myself, but it might not be me. We're still leaving a little ambiguity in there. It's like he's looking at a police artist sketch instead of a photo. So I thought that was great. That was a great illustrator of what or how to listen for psychological distancing. Instead of just saying me, he says that. And when he is getting close to saying the woman's name at the end, it just trails off.
Yep. All right.
The world has now seen the photo that Virginia Roberts provided, taken by Epstein, we understand, in Ghislaine Maxwell's house.
Well, here's the problem. I've never seen Epstein with a camera in my life.
I think it was Virginia Roberts' camera. She said a little Kodak one that she lent to Epstein. He took a photo, and your arm is round her waist.
I don't remember that photograph ever being taken. I don't remember going upstairs in the house, because that photograph is taken upstairs. And I'm not entirely convinced that, I mean, that is what I would describe as me in that picture. But we can't be certain as to whether or not that's my hand on her, whatever it is, left side.
Anybody else? We good?
Good.
Right.
Yeah.
She made these claims in a US deposition.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying you don't believe her? She's lying?
That's a very difficult thing to answer, because I'm not in a position to know what she's trying to achieve, but I can tell you categorically, I don't remember meeting her at all. I do not remember a photograph being taken, and I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact whatever.
Once again, he's repeating that same thing all over again. And the classic line that tells me that he knows he's in trouble, because he says, and I always hate to bring up Anthony Weiner, but Anthony Weiner is one of my favorites to just wail on. But when he says, I can tell you this, he can't tell us anything else because they're going to get him in trouble. He's going to go to prison or whatever. And that's usually what happens. But he's saying, I can tell you this. And that's the part that supposedly shows that he's not being deceptive, that he's telling the truth. I can tell you this. Why can't he tell us anything? Why can't he tell us any more? Because if he does tell us any more, if he tells us anything besides that, he's going to be in trouble. What do you think about that, Chase?
Well, back just a few minutes ago, he said he doesn't remember her. And now he's talking about not having sex with her. So that's a little change here. And we also see, obviously, I'm sure everybody saw it, he's failing to answer the question completely. Any one of us, any normal human being would say, absolutely, she's guilty of perjury. She has perjured herself, and none of that stuff is true. And we see a little bit more psychological distancing here. He's failing to use the name of the victim, and he's also saying sexual contact instead of sex. So anybody who is accusing or an innocent person has no problem saying those words. They have no problem saying the criminal type of words, the more severe words to describe a crime.
What do you got, Greg?
Yeah, so a few things. You're dead on. No denial at all. First of all, did you have sex with that woman? No. I'm going to run over a couple, but here is the Bill Clinton statement. I have said consistently and frequently, We had we had never had any sexual contact, whatever. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. That is his statement, in the same way that Bill Clinton did. Doesn't say he's lying, says it's a prepared and canned statement that he's worked on. He probably had an attorney working with him to make sure he said the right things. He also then, we pick up on the same things a lot of times, Chase. He said, instead of no recollection, this. No recollection. I have no recollection of that woman has been his argument all along. He's a little bit off the reservation there. And then when he says, I categorically deny, this is one of the few times he does a straight down eye contact break, which we typically think of as submission. They know they're on the griddle and those eyes break straight down. That's not accessing. Nobody accesses like that I've ever seen in my life. You may access this way, that way, this way, this way, but that's breaking eye contact in a submissive fashion. Odd for him. First time I've seen it.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything because it's a waste of our time and a waste of the audience's time, who are intelligent enough to look at what's happening there and the verbal obfuscation going on to understand, exactly what's happening here. I think it's been said. The interesting thing is we're just unpacking intellectually what everybody knows. And if there's any moment in this interview that meant that next day he needed to resign, this is it. Because isn't it a simple answer? Is she lying? Yes, she's lying.
All right.
It would be simple.
Well, that's all we got. Unless you guys can think of something else we need to cover. Okay, well, let's throw it around the room. Greg, you want to give us your 10, 15,
guys,
second wrap-up?
We have looked at baseline of him, and no, he has a little bit of a wonky baseline anyway, although grooming himself, Chase, to use your terms, but he licks his lips a lot. It's just who he is as he's preparing to talk. So some of the things that we see, unless it's really pronounced, are not abnormal for him. We look at baseline, and I'll always say, I am obsessed with baseline. Baseline is the only thing that matters to me. The rest of the stuff is nuance, but baseline is what tells you when something is changing. As you walk through this, if you really want to be entertained, turn the video on, turn the sound off, and turn closed captioning on, and look at the sentences with 97 words and what and who and when and how in one sentence. This guy is brilliant at staying off of the topic he doesn't want to until he's not. When he gets there, he's like a worm on the griddle. We missed the one piece that we probably should have covered, and that's I can't sweat. That's a great piece of, really, you're sweating pretty hard right now. Otherwise, he gets in a bind a lot of times because of a great questioner. And if you're watching this and you want to do a good job of detecting lies, pay attention. You need to focus and get the person to answer questions, not allow them to give you chaff and run in another direction.
Mark, what about you?
Yeah, so the same. If you're out there and you're wanting to detect lies, yes, there's look at what people are saying. There's look at what they're doing. There's also look at the atmosphere that they're putting around themselves. And how are they using the narrative of that atmosphere, the idea that they're projecting about themselves to manage you and manage your compliance around the story. There's the story, and then there's getting you to join in with that story. And that they'll do with often status, authority. Sometimes they'll lower their status to do that. That's often done in the con. The con artist will get you to think that you're a higher status than you are in order to get you to engage with their story, which is too good to be true. In this situation, what this person is doing is trying to constantly raise their status so the accusations couldn't possibly be true because they're too high up, too virtuous, too honorable.
Chase?
Well, he is too honorable. He told you himself.
I comply.
Yeah. I think we saw management here. This was just perception management 101. And I think that there is a legitimate concern from the prince that there is something or someone out there that has information that could seriously hurt him. And one question I would have loved to ask and this is something that most interrogators know. This is, why do you think people do this kind of thing? I would have loved to hear his response and whether or not he denounced this stuff, because it was never really brought under the light. And that might have been a mandate for the interview. Like, we can talk about all this, but we're not going to bring this up. But I would have loved to bring that into light and say, why do you think people do this kind of thing? And get a reaction. And that would be really telling at the very beginning of the interview.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, for me, I agree with everybody in this. Greg, when it comes to the baseline, I think what we're seeing here is that a wonderfully and almost perfectly executed delivery of the information that he's supposed to be giving. And he's giving it in that, and he's sitting in the context like Mark's talking about. He's there in the palace, or where everything looks expensive, and it's all the hoo-ha that comes along with that. To put his story in, and then what Chase is talking about as far as protecting himself and making sure that everything is cool. Although he knows something's up or that he's in trouble, he still continues to protect himself. And I think she did a great job. The interviewer did a wonderful job at this. And I think, and this guy is brilliant. I know I keep saying that, but I'm telling you, this guy is so smart. I think he did a fantastic job of protecting himself as he went through there. But it's like a swimmer in protecting yourself from a great white shark. He's done for. And I think he shows. I saw a lot of and we'll go around and talk about the percentages of truth indicators compared to the percentages of deception indicators. And when it comes to that, for me, I saw a lot of truth there. I saw a lot of things, him tell a lot of truth, a lot of things he was telling. I'm going to say on deception, I saw about 80% of what he's talking about, or 70 to 80%. But the rest of that 20 to 30% is the truth, I think, because as he goes through and is telling what happened, and he's relaying personal things that really did happen, but he's leaving things out, the omission part of it. So that's what I think. I'm thinking it's 70, 80% deception, and then 30, 20% truth. What do you think, Mark?
Go ahead, I would say that the baselines that we see for truth telling for him is which of Epstein's buildings he's been to. And, just get that baseline of, you've been to this place. Yes. This one. Yes. This one. Yes. I mean, if I were to look at where are we seeing the most truth, that's where I'd go to.
So for me, I would say he is 50% truthful. 50%. Let me back up. I would say he's about 50% truthful when he's talking about things. It's deception in places because of the way he strings the pieces together. But there's about 30% chaff in this. There's so much misdirect and redirect that it's difficult to call it deception. And the true deception is when he refuses to deny something, when he refuses to admit something. Either one of those is deception. The last thing I would leave is this. You don't need to be an expert to know, to feel this, to see this. The British public figured this out pretty quickly. That's the reason he left the next day, and there's been a lot of fallout from this. We all instinctively can read some of this. We're putting words to it so that you can learn to quantify what you're seeing. That's our intent.
Chase?
I'm going to go with 75 deception, 25 truth. I think there are some things in there that we could see 100%. He was very, very honest about. I think the kids spending the evening with his kids at the pizza place, that happened. And you can see it in the behavior. There's no hesitation. There's no couching, no avoidance. So I'm going to go with 75.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, I think this has been a good one. And we'll find something else and we'll get on that.